Okay, it is 11 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Uh, Good morning, everybody. My name is Jacob Turner. I'm the Web Developer and Communications Liaison for the Arkansas Conference, and I welcome you to today's webinar. We're going to be covering the Paycheck Protection Program, updates to the program today. And with us is Todd Burris, Director for the Center for Administrative Services for the conference, and Megan Rugg, who is the Assistant Director. We want to welcome y'all again, and without further ado, I'll turn it over to Todd and Megan.
Hi, everyone. Let me make sure I'm unmuted. I am. Yay. Thanks for joining us. We're going to get started. I've asked Jacob to throw up a poll real quick. We want to know how many churches have already applied for the loan, received the loan, and how many are still considering it. So if you can throw that up for us, Jacob, that'll help kind of dictate where we're going from here. Okay. It looks like all of you have already gotten the loan, which is great, good news. So we're really going to focus kind of more on what we need to do to make sure that the loan becomes forgivable. So bear with us, because this is also going to get posted on YouTube for reference later. And we're going to run through just a few quick slides for those that are still considering it. So Megan, if you'll, I think Megan's got control of the slides. Yeah, so real quick, background of the PPP check protection loan, what the use of the funds and the forgivable policies, and then some best practices we've found are topics we're going to cover. Go ahead. Yes, so in March, the CARES Act was established the Paycheck Protection Program that allows small businesses to apply for the loan to keep their workers on the payroll and during the coronavirus pandemic. They've had various updates to the small business issued by the Small Business Administration, including FAQs for faith-based organizations. All of this was done after the loan was the law was actually signed into effect. And for anybody watching this online, yes, you can still apply, but the deadline is June 30th. Your applications go through your bank, so contact your banker. And if you need help with that application, feel free to contact us. Megan's going to start talking about eligible uses of the loan now.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to discuss quickly the eligible uses of the loan, since all of you have already applied for it. I'm sure you're familiar, but just as an overview, payroll costs, of course, are an eligible use that includes salary, but the salary is limited to an annualized $100,000 salary. Other payroll costs can be included as well. That includes the church's PIP contributions to their employees, 403B accounts, and also the payments for the defined benefit and defined contribution plan for clergy. It does not include the CPP plan, because that is a death and disability insurance benefit, and the CARES Act is specific in saying only health insurance premiums are included in payroll costs. You can also include rent or lease payments as long as that obligation was in place prior to February 15th of 2020, and mortgage interest payments, which also is something that had to be in place by February 15th of 2020. Utility cost can be included. That includes electric, gas, water, sewer, and telephone and internet, which is good. And there's been a lot of debate over cost and what can be included as eligible to, for forgiveness. And I've read several things. It could be that the cost was paid during the covered period, but not necessarily incurred during the covered period. And then I've also heard it needs to be paid and incurred during the covered period. So just to be on the safe side, I'd like to encourage everyone to only include costs that are incurred and paid during the covered period. And this is where the Flexibility Act comes into play, because the new Flexibility Act that was just signed into law June 5th says that the covered period can now be 24 weeks instead of 8 weeks. So you have plenty of time to include incurred and paid costs during that 24 weeks.
Megan, will you, in layman's term, explain covered or incurred and paid for
Yes.
when it comes to payroll?
So yes. So say you have a PPP loan and the last day of the covered period is June 30th, and you prepay your rent. So on June 25th, you pay your July rent. Your July rent is technically incurred in July. That's when that expense is incurred. That's the month that the expense is truly made, but you paid for it in June. So there's a cutoff there that I know several churches were worried about, and us at the conference were worried about as well. But now that the covered period is extended to 24 weeks, you have a lot more time to make sure that you get costs that are incurred and paid within those weeks. Forgiveness is the big topic here, because the PPP loan can turn into a grant if you meet certain criteria, and which includes meeting certain requirements with your expenses, using your expenses appropriately. The application for forgiveness is already on the SBA website. It was put on the website before the Flexibility Act was passed, so it's possible that I would assume the SBA will be updating the forgiveness application ultimately to account for some of the changes in the Flexibility Act. You can find it on that website, and then I would assume most of the local banks will have it as well. And once you complete your application, you will give it to your banker that you got the loan with. The Flexibility Act gives you 10 months after the covered period, after the last day of the covered period, to submit your application. And if you don't submit a forgiveness application within 10 months, then you have to start making interest and principal payments on your loan. Payroll cost used to have to account for 75% of your loan proceeds, and your utilities, rent payments, mortgage interest could only be 25% of those funds. Now the percentages have changed, and payroll cost now only have to account for at least 60% of the funds, and all of your other expenses 40 or less percent of the funds. And if you can meet that criteria, then that's one more check to make sure that your loan is forgiven. You can have your loan forgiveness discounted by a decrease in employee counts. Right now, they say if the decrease is more than 25%, that's when they'll proportionately start reducing your loan forgiveness amount. The Flexibility Act did come out and say that you will not be affected by employee decreases if you can document that you were unable to hire individuals back, unable to rehire them once they were initially terminated at the beginning of the quarantine, or that you're unable to rehire someone that's similarly qualified to fill that position. So if you cannot rehire someone and you can prove that, then you don't get docked for this employee production and count. Or the other option is you can show that you were unable to return to the same level of business activity you had prior to February 15, 2020, due to being in compliance with requirements by DHS and other organizations. So you don't necessarily have an automatic decrease in your loan forgiveness amount. You may be able to meet some of these criteria here and prove that you were unable to hire or unable to return to the same level of business activity as prior to February 15th. So best practices, of course, there haven't been many organizations that have applied for forgiveness yet. This is all starting up now. The 8-week initial cover periods are just ending, and I would assume most will opt to have a 24-week cover period. But best practices for documentation include keeping all of your invoices that you pay, copies of your invoices, keeping copies of canceled checks to show that, or clear checks, that show that payments were made. As far as payroll goes, you may want to keep a register of what your employee count was each pay period prior to the quarantine, during the quarantine cover period, and then after cover period up to, I would say, December 31st if you've got that long to apply for forgiveness. Also, loan documents, if you're making mortgage interest payments out of your covered loan, be sure that you have all of your loan documents in place that can show that those were effective prior to February 15th. As well as rent or lease agreements. You want to make sure you have those documents on hand as possible, that the bank will ask to see those to ensure that they were in place prior to 2020. Since most of you have loans prior to the Flexibility Act being into place, I will just say that everything in the Flexibility Act does apply to you, except there's one item in there that says that this only applies to loans going forward, and that is if for some reason all of your loan is not forgiven, all of us who got loans prior to the Flexibility Act being passed have 2 years to pay back that loan. But any loan taken out after the Flexibility Act was passed has 5 years. So there's a difference in the loan period for loans before and after the Flexibility Act. But in general, everything else in the Flexibility Act applies to all PPP loans. And one other item on here in the Flexibility Act I wanted to mention is previously, if you had a PPP loan, you could not take advantage of the payroll tax deferral. So you could defer the payment of your payroll taxes and pay 50% by the end of 2021, 50% by the end.
Megan, you're cutting out on that. Could you repeat that one?
Yeah. Previously, maybe I need to look straight at the computer. Previously, if you had a PPP loan, you could not take advantage of the payroll tax deferral program. So that program allowed you to not pay any payroll tax on your employees and defer that payment to 2021 and 2022, paying 50% of that deferral each year. So it's not gifted to you. You have to pay it, but just later. Previously, they said if you have a PPP loan, you can't do that. But now they're saying If you have a PPP loan, you can also take advantage of that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to mention it. It would be a small benefit to churches in comparison to the loan, and it does have to be repaid in the next 2 years. But I did want to mention that's an option.
Yeah, and I would caution churches against that, simply because you could forget and then wind up having judgments against you. Unless you're just strapped for cash, I would not defer those payments. Please, do your best to try to keep up on those payments.
And that's the end of our short presentation.
Yeah.
That covers the Flexibility Act. It was really pretty short. It was only, I think, 6 pages long, and specifically changed a few lines in the CARES Act. But we wanted to take some time and answer as many questions as we could.
So the first one was posted from Jocelyn, that the new forgiveness application is on the SBA websites with revisions made yesterday. Have you seen?
Oh, good. Okay, I haven't seen that.
Okay, good.
So yeah, so that's good. They've updated it because previously it only mentioned an 8-week covered period. There's the 8-week covered period. You don't have to do anything with your bank to tell them that you don't want to use an 8-week covered period. Automatically just say, automatically move to 24 weeks. So that's good. Some extra time.
So are there other questions out there? I'm not seeing any, but we would love to hear your thoughts and questions. And
on the email that went out this morning, I misread about application deadlines. The program is in effect for December 31st, but I wanted to be clear that the application deadline is still June 30th. So if you know of someone that hasn't applied yet and is considering it, they only have a couple of weeks left to do it.
well, if there aren't any questions, I think that's all we had to share. So please feel free to email us, and because those questions which prompt responses and ideas of things to share with other churches. So if you have questions or run into hurdles and find a way to overcome them, share us your success stories too, so we can, Amy and everybody can send that out to the rest of the conference. Yes, the webinar will be archived and available on YouTube. So Weeza Boyd says, I know the application was for full-time employees, but are part-time employees included in forgiveness? Yes.
Yes, they are. And you have an option with part-time employees. You can actually calculate the percentage they would be of a full-time employee. So divide their hours by a full 40-hour-a-week employee, or you can make the option of saying all part-time employees are 0.5 when adding up employee count. So you'll want to do a little strategic calculations there to see how much would these part-time employees affect my employee count before the loan and after, to make sure that you get the right outcome. And you have that option.
Now, and I think, and in fact, I'm fairly certain that the first webinar we did on this, we said the application was going to be available in a week, and it came out like an hour later, right after our webinar was finished, and then we find out the forgiveness form was updated this morning. So I don't suspect we will do another webinar on the form, but I think Megan could do some FAQ instructions on how to fill out the form now that we have an updated form, and we can send that out via an email blast.
Yes, I have attended several webinars on all of these topics, and one had a really good handout that was step by step
Perfect.
for each of the questions on the forgiveness form. So I'll try, and it was extremely detailed, maybe too cumbersome to look through. So I'll try and give a good summary of that and the form itself using the new form. This was, of course, with the old form. So that'll be something we can work on and send out in an email. And then, of course, you can always reach Todd or I if you have specific questions.
All right. I think that's it. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll be in touch, and if more information comes out, we will try to share that with you as soon as we can. So thanks everybody.